On this edition of Early Look, I'm going to be previewing the UFC 314 lightweight fight, 5 rounds, Michael Chandler, Paddy Pimblett, for all the bragging rights here. My name is James Lynch. If you never watched the show before, I'm going to go through a bunch of different stats. Then I'm going to give you my prediction at the end of this video. So after you watch this thing, let me know in the comments which way you're leaning, which side you're on. We'd love to have a discussion with you about this fight. But like we always do on the show, I'm going to do a quick tail of the tape. Then we're going to dig into everything here. You can see Michael Chandler 23-9, Paddy Pimblett 22-3, 38-30, 5'8" to 5'10", 71.5 to 73. So Paddy Pimblett not only going to be a bit bigger in terms of the height and the reach, he's also 8 years younger than Michael Chandler. But let's start first with the former UFC title challenger, Michael Chandler. Have a look at his accolades so far. I did mention this is a 5-round fight. And I actually went back and looked here. Michael Chandler's prepared for 5-round fights 13 times in his total MMA career. So that's a lot more than Paddy Pimblett. We'll talk about how many times he's trained for that. Just something to consider when you're looking at this fight. So I mentioned it there. Michael Chandler, 23-9. He's got 10 knockouts, 7 submissions, and 5 decisions. He's 38 years old, 5'8" with a 71.5-inch reach. He's currently ranked number 7 in the lightweight division. He's the 3-time Bellator lightweight champion. He's got the Bellator Season 4 lightweight tournament winner. He's also a former NCAA Division I champion wrestler. Not champion, former NCAA Division I wrestler at the University of Missouri. Splits time between Kill Cliff FC and Nashville MMA. He's got Performance of the Night 2 times against Dan Hooker and Tony Ferguson. He's got Fight of the Night 3 times against Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, and most recently Charles Oliveira. Chandler did not have an amateur debut. No surprise there. Went straight to the pros way back in August of 2009. Did not make his UFC debut until August of 2000. Made his MMA debut in August of 2009, made his UFC debut in January of 2021. Michael Chandler is 2-4 in his UFC career. He's only got 2 stoppage victories. Some notable wins include Dan Hooker and Tony Ferguson. Those are the only wins that he has in the UFC. If you want to talk about other notable wins, Benson Henderson and Eddie Alvarez in Bellator. Some notable losses include Justin Gaethje, 2 losses to Charles Oliveira. Another guy we'll mention now because he's in the UFC, Patricio Pitbull, and then obviously lost to Eddie Alvarez and 2 losses to Will Brooks in Bellator as well. He also lost to Dustin Poirier too, so those are some notable losses. He's only had 1 major layoff in his UFC career so far, and that's obviously him chasing the Conor McGregor fight. Going from Dustin Poirier to Charles Oliveira, there was a 735-day layoff. Doesn't have as much of a layoff here, obviously fighting in November and now fighting Paddy here in April. He's been in 1 close fight in his career. He's had a couple close fights. They were back in Bellator, though. Don't need to mention those. Let's go to Chandler's UFC stats. You can look at significant strikes landed per minute, 4.49. His striking accuracy is at 50%. His striking defense is at 43%. So does get hit a little bit in terms of the overall shots that he takes. His takedown average is at 1.59, so he does get some takedowns. His takedown accuracy is only at 37%. His takedown defense is at 63%. We'll see if Paddy can get a takedown here. And his sub average is at 0.6. So again, not a ton of stuff to talk about Michael Chandler in the UFC. He's only got 6 fights so far. Let's move along to his opponent, Paddy Pimblett, who again, 22-3 record. He's got 6 knockouts, 10 submissions, and 6 decisions. He's currently ranked number 12 in the lightweight division. He is 30 years old, 5'10" with a 73-inch reach, so he's 8 years younger. He'll have a 2-inch height and 1.5-inch reach advantage in this fight. He's a BJJ black belt. He's got Performance of the Night 3 times against Luigi Vendramini, Rodrigo Vargas, Jordan Levitt, and I believe he got a Performance of the Night bonus against Bobby Green as well, so I think I left that one out there. He's also the former Cage Warriors featherweight champion. Did not have an amateur debut, went straight to the pros way back in October of 2012. Made his UFC debut in September of 2021. So interesting that both Chandler and Pimblett had their UFC debuts the exact same year, if I'm correct. Let me just double check that. Yep, they both did. Chandler's was in January. Paddy Pimblett's was in September. He's got a 6-0 UFC record. He's got 5 stoppage victories. Hold on, might be 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, 4 stoppage victories, not 5. So I'm not good at math, guys, and I'm doing this. He's got only 2 notable wins in the UFC. One is Tony Ferguson, and the other one is King Green, his last fight. Paddy Pimblett has trained for 5-round fights before. They were back in Cage Warriors. That was 4 times he did that. So comparing 13-4, there is a bit of a difference there as far as Chandler's championship title experience as opposed to Paddy Pimblett's. Let's go back and look at some close fights that he's had. Actually, there's one close fight we got to mention in the UFC, and that's the Jared Gordon fight. If you go look at MMA decisions right now, we'll actually do that right now so you guys can see the visual here. Where are we here? So MMA decisions is where the media puts their scorecards for each fighter. So if you go look on how people voted on who won that fight, it is worth noting that the majority of the media thought that Jared Gordon won the fight. I mean, it's pretty obvious here. And 30-27 too, a lot of people feeling that way. So was it a robbery? I mean, it's about as close to a robbery as you'll get. There was a lot of media members who felt that Jared Gordon won all the rounds. At the very least, there was still just as many who thought that he won 29-28. One guy, Dan Urban, scored it for Paddy Pimblett. Don't agree with that. I think I'm on the side here that I thought Jared Gordon won. I'm more on the 29-28 side. So again, that probably should have been a loss for Paddy Pimblett. It's important to note that as we're talking about level of opposition and who they fought and all that. Okay, let's look at Paddy Pimblett's stats here. So you can see Pimblett, significant strikes landed per minute, 4.94, which I believe is higher than yeah, just slightly higher than Michael Chandler. His striking accuracy is at 53%. His striking defense is at 40%, so it's lower than Chandler. So Chandler's 43%, Pimblett's is 40. His takedown average is 0.91, doesn't get a ton of takedowns. His takedown accuracy is at 25%, whereas Chandler's is at 37%. And his takedown defense is at 52%, whereas Michael Chandler's is at 63%. So a little bit better on that. And then the sub average is higher. He's at 2.1, Michael Chandler only at 0.6, but Chandler's not really much of a submission guy overall. Let's have a look at the odds right now and take a look at this. So you can see Michael Chandler, the underdog on most books, about plus 110 on most books here. Paddy Pimblett, the slight favorite at minus 130, minus 138 on FanDuel right now is the time of recording this. And then Tapology telling a bit of a similar story here as far as the odds being close here. 53% by Paddy Pimblett, 47% for Michael Chandler. Most people picking Chandler by knockout at 80.7%. Paddy Pimblett, 69.4% by submission. So a lot of people feel like Pimblett will submit him. Just 21% by decision, 27% by decision, and there's 3.6% of people who think that Paddy Pimblett will knock out Michael Chandler. Okay, so which way am I going on this one? If you've watched any of my live streams, if you watched the video I did when this fight first came out, the pick's going to remain the same. I like Michael Chandler here, guys, and here's why. Well, first, let me tell you how I think Chandler's going to win. I think he's going to knock out Paddy Pimblett. Couple things. Let's go through the reasons. So I think it's going to be a 4th round knockout here for Paddy Pimblett in this fight. Chandler's got to win. His back's against the wall here. He's lost too many key fights. This to me is this is a big step down in competition going from Charles Oliveira to Paddy Pimblett. Here's why I think Michael Chandler gets it done. First and foremost, I think Michael Chandler's fought better competition overall than Paddy Pimblett has. Look who he's been in there with the UFC. People can say what they want about not liking Chandler and all this different stuff. And that, I do think that does play into this, by the way. I got to mention this. There's a lot of people who don't like Michael Chandler, from his quotes to his personal life to him chasing the Conor fight, all this different stuff. I think that adds into people not picking Michael Chandler here. I'll just mention that as like a side note. But you look at who he's fought here. Oliveira, Gaethje, Poirier, Oliveira. Doesn't get much tougher than that. His one wins against Ferguson, similar opponent. Chandler finished him. Paddy Pimblett didn't. I don't think MMA math really applies here, but that is one thing that is worth noting. So yeah, Chandler fought better opposition, and I do think it's a big jump going from King Green, that Paddy Pimblett just defeated, to Michael Chandler. I do think Chandler is still, despite what people think, I still think he's a pretty good fighter in the weight class. I'll say it right here. I think people are way overhyping Pimblett's win over Bobby Green, because that's the big win that got him this fight. Let's be honest here. And he did submit Bobby Green. Bobby Green, I think, hadn't been submitted in a very long time. In fact, that might have said his only submission loss. I'm trying to even remember. Obviously, we're recording this before Bobby Green's fight at UFC 313. So he's been submitted 3 times, but not really common for Bobby Green to get submitted. So I'll give him that. But if you watch that fight, Bobby Green basically gave him the submission. And what I mean by give it to him is just bad fight IQ. He put himself in a really bad position, and Paddy Pimblett took advantage. Now, I will say that Pimblett was looking good before that, but still, I think people are really overrating that win, in my opinion. 46% of Chandler's wins are by KO, TKO, 11 total in his career. So if you look at Chandler's overall career, he typically does win by knockout. Here's another key thing, and I talked about it earlier. Paddy Pimblett's striking defense is at 40%. He gets hit a lot, guys. And he's getting hit by opponents that aren't even that amazing. Like Luigi Vendramini, go watch that debut. Vendramini hit Paddy Pimblett pretty good. That shouldn't happen against a guy like Luigi Vendramini, who last time I checked is not even in the UFC. So there's that. Now, on the flip side, Chandler gets hit a lot too. He's been knocked out a bunch of times. He was knocked out by Oliveira in the second round. Actually, I say he gets knocked out a lot. Did go the distance with Gaethje, who's got finishing power. He was choked out by Poirier. Again, more people feel, just 3% of people think that Pimblett's going to knock him out. So I'm not saying that. I'm just pointing that out in general. The submission wins. Here's another thing. You look at Chandler's submission losses. He's got 1 submission loss in however many fights he has, 32 career fights. So that's another key stat here. I think a lot of people feel, and I've heard it from a lot of people, saying that Pimblett's ground game is so good, all he has to do is get Chandler to ground and submit him. I don't know if he does that. Again, Charles Oliveira didn't even go for the submission. He went for the knockout against Chandler, and this is probably one of the best jiu-jitsu guys in the weight class. So, and then the other thing I argue too is that I don't think Pimblett's fought like a power puncher like Chandler. Like we saw what Chandler did to Dan Hooker, and I know that fight was a couple of years ago, but still, he's got the power to put people's lights out. I don't think Pimblett's fought anyone like that in the UFC. Let's look over the resume here. You know, Green does have it a bit, but I wouldn't put Green in the same category. Ferguson doesn't have it. Jared Gordon doesn't really have it. Jordan Levitt, Vargas, Vendramin, these guys are not knockout artists. Chandler is, so there's that too. I know people probably point to the fact that Pimblett's never been knocked out in his career, but he has been tagged a few times, and that's a bit worrisome. So that's another thing as well. I think Chandler's the better wrestler. I think he's the better striker. And like I said, he's only been submitted one time. So what's the path to victory for Pimblett? I don't think Pimblett's going to outstrike Chandler. Maybe he gets him on the ground and controls him. Maybe. But again, you're talking about a guy in Chandler who's pretty strong for the weight class. And he didn't look good in his last fight. I'll give you that. He didn't look very good against Charles Oliveira. But I think Oliveira would do the exact same thing to Paddy Pimblett. I don't think Pimblett is as advertised as some people are making him out to be. So again, I know the age is a concern. I know the lack of activity is a concern. Again, Chandler was chasing that, fight with Conor McGregor, and that certainly took years off his activity and everything that he's done. So that is concerning here. And let's also not forget that Chandler has some bad fight IQ. I realize all that. I'm bringing it up because I know people in the comments are going to mention that. Don't get me wrong. Chandler could fight dumb in this fight and lose. That could certainly happen. But at the end of the day, the overall body of work tells me Chandler should win this fight. Like I said, he can tag Pimblett. He can knock him out. It's 5 rounds. The chances of a finish are more likely in a fight like this. Chandler's got more 5-round experience as far as training for it and even going the distance than Paddy Pimblett does. I think that works in his favor too. I just think you got 5 rounds to knock out Paddy Pimblett. I think Chandler's the guy to do it. So I'm going Chandler by 4th round knockout to get it done over Paddy Pimblett. Going to go against the grain a little bit here, and I'm taking him. So I want to know what you guys think in the comments section below. What's your prediction for this fight? Who do you think gets it done? Let me know how you think it goes down. Would love to hear from you in the comments. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. My name is James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on another edition of Early Look.